The Varith had ruled the stars for 3,000 years. Their empire stretched across 1,000 worlds, and every species they found learned the same lesson: obey or die. Commander Thexis Vor stood on the bridge of his warship, looking down at the blue planet below. Earth, the human homeworld. Such a small and ordinary place, he thought. The humans had joined the galactic community only 40 years ago. They were weak, soft, and lived such short lives. Their technology was primitive. Their military was laughable. When the Dominion had offered them protection, the humans had accepted without firing a single shot. Thexis had been disappointed. He enjoyed breaking species that fought back. It made victory taste sweeter. Now, 5 years later, the humans had colonies on 12 worlds. The Varith had placed each one under guidance, a polite word for control. Human workers mined ore for Varith factories. Human farmers grew food for Varith armies. Human children learned to bow when Varith soldiers walked past. This was the natural order of things. Thexis turned away from the window and walked through the corridors of his ship. His heavy footsteps echoed on the metal floor. The Varith were tall beings, almost 3 meters in height, with gray skin like stone and 4 arms that ended in sharp claws. Their eyes were black and cold, like the space between stars. He had been assigned to oversee the human colony on Kepler 442b, a world the humans called New Providence. It was a farming planet, green and peaceful, with rolling hills and clear rivers. 20,000 humans lived there, working the land and raising their families. They had been content at first, grateful even for Dominion protection. But then the taxes came, then the labor quotas, then the soldiers in the streets watching everything, punishing everything. The humans had started to complain. They wrote letters to the Galactic Council. They organized peaceful marches in the colony square. They believed that someone would help them, that justice existed somewhere in the cold universe. Thexis found their hope amusing. He had seen 100 species go through the same stages. First came denial, then anger, then desperate hope, and finally acceptance. The humans were still in the hope stage. They would learn. His shuttle landed at the Colonial Administration Building, a gray concrete structure that squatted in the center of the main settlement. Human colonists stopped to watch as he walked past. He saw fear in their eyes, but also something else, something he could not quite name. Governor Talas met him at the entrance. Talas was a Varith bureaucrat, soft and fat from years of easy living. He bowed low before Thexis. "Commander, welcome. I trust your journey was pleasant." "It was adequate," Thexis replied. "Report." They walked inside, past human servants who pressed themselves against the walls to make room. Talas spoke quickly, nervously. "Production quotas are being met, Commander. The humans work hard. There have been some minor disturbances, protests, nothing we cannot handle." "Protests?" "They object to the new labor requirements. Some families have been separated to meet workforce demands in the mining sector. The humans are emotional creatures. They do not understand efficiency." Thexis stopped walking. He turned his black eyes toward Talas, who shrank back. "Show me." They went to the central square, where a group of humans had gathered. There were perhaps 200 of them, standing in a circle, holding signs with words Thexis did not bother to read. They were chanting something about rights, about freedom, about their children. A line of Varith soldiers stood between the protesters and the administration building. The soldiers held shock staves and wore full armor. They looked bored. Thexis watched for a moment. The humans were not violent. They did not throw things or attack the soldiers. They simply stood there making noise, believing that their voices mattered. "Disperse them," Thexis ordered. The soldiers moved forward. The shock staves crackled with blue energy. The humans screamed and ran, but not fast enough. Thexis watched as the soldiers beat them to the ground, as they dragged the loudest ones away for questioning. One human woman tried to shield a small child with her body. A soldier kicked her aside and raised his stave over the crying child. "Leave the young ones," Thexus said, almost bored. "They are not yet useful for labor, but they will be. Damaging them serves no purpose." The soldier lowered his weapon. The woman grabbed her child and fled. Within minutes, the square was empty except for a few bodies lying on the ground. Some were moving, some were not. Talas wrung his hands. "Commander, the Galactic Council may hear of this. There are rules about the treatment of—" "The Council will hear what we tell them to hear," Thexus interrupted. "And they will do nothing. They never do. The Dominion is too powerful and the humans are too insignificant. This is how the galaxy works, Governor. You would do well to remember it." He walked among the fallen bodies, his clawed feet stepping over pools of blood. A human man looked up at him with hatred in his eyes. Thexus kicked him in the face and moved on. That night Thexus dined alone in the governor's mansion. Human servants brought him food and wine, their hands trembling as they poured. He enjoyed their fear. Fear was the foundation of all stable government. Outside the window, the colony was quiet. Curfew had been imposed. Any human found on the streets would be arrested. The lesson had been taught. But as Thexus looked out at the dark streets, he noticed something strange. In the windows of the human homes, small lights flickered. Candles. Hundreds of them, thousands of them, burning in every window. A servant noticed him looking. "It is a human custom, my lord," she said quietly. "They light candles for the dead and for hope." Thexus laughed. "Hope? What hope do they have?" The servant did not answer. She lowered her eyes and backed away. Thexus turned from the window and finished his meal. The candles meant nothing. The humans would learn their place as all species did. They would work, they would obey, and in a generation or two they would forget they had ever dreamed of freedom. He was certain of this. He was wrong. 3 months passed after the protest. The colony of New Providence returned to its quiet routine. Humans worked in the fields during the day and stayed inside at night. The Varith soldiers patrolled the streets, and the governor collected his taxes. But beneath the surface, something was changing. In the small farming district on the eastern edge of the colony, there lived a family named Chen. The father, Wei, worked in the grain processing plant. The mother, Lin, tended a small garden behind their housing unit. They had one daughter, a 7-year-old girl named Lily. Lily was a happy child. She had dark hair that her mother tied in 2 braids, and she smiled at everyone she met. She loved to pick wildflowers in the field behind her home, arranging them in patterns on the ground. She would spend hours there, singing songs to herself, creating little gardens that only she could see. On a warm afternoon in early spring, Lily went out to pick flowers as she always did. Her mother watched her go, calling out to stay close and come home before dark. "I will, Mama," Lily shouted back, already running toward the field. She did not see the Varith patrol coming down the road. Enforcer Keth Morin was tired and angry. He had been stationed on this backwater world for 2 years, surrounded by weak humans who flinched at his shadow. He hated this assignment. He hated the heat, the dust, and the endless fields of grain. He wanted to be on a real battlefield, killing real enemies, earning real glory. His patrol turned onto the road that bordered the flower field. Keth saw the small human child kneeling in the grass, surrounded by colorful blooms. She was humming something tuneless and happy. "Move," Keth ordered. "This area is restricted." Lily looked up at the tall gray creature standing over her. She had seen Varith before, always walking in groups, always carrying weapons. Her parents had told her to stay away from them. "I'm just picking flowers," she said. Her voice was small but not afraid. "I said move." Keth stepped forward, and his heavy boot crushed the pile of flowers Lily had carefully arranged. "No," Lily cried. She had worked all afternoon on that arrangement. Without thinking, she picked up one of the flowers from the ground and threw it at the soldier. It bounced harmlessly off his armor and fell to the dirt. Keth looked down at the flower on his chest plate. A child had thrown something at him. A human child had dared to strike a Varith enforcer. Something dark twisted in his chest. Rage, yes, but also something else. A desire to remind these creatures of their place, to make an example. He raised his plasma rifle and set it to maximum. Lily did not even have time to scream. The shot echoed across the field. Lin Chen heard it from her garden. She dropped her tools and ran. When she reached the field, she found only scorched earth where her daughter had been. The flowers around the spot had been burned away. The Varith patrol was already marching down the road, not looking back. Lin fell to her knees. The sound that came from her throat was not human. It was the sound of something breaking that could never be fixed. Within an hour, the entire colony knew what had happened. Within 2 hours, the story had reached Earth. The humans had built something during their centuries of wars and progress. They called it the Mesh, a network of communication that connected every human device across the galaxy. The Varith had tried to control it, to monitor it, to shut it down. They had failed. The Mesh was not a single system, but a million small ones, built by humans for humans, running on code that changed and adapted and survived. Lily Chen's school photo appeared on every human screen that night. Her gap-toothed smile, her bright eyes, the crayon drawing she had made the week before, showing her family standing in front of their home, a yellow sun in the corner. And then the video appeared. Someone had been recording from their window when the shot was fired. The footage was grainy, but it showed everything. A little girl throwing a flower, a soldier raising his weapon, a flash of light. The galaxy watched a 7-year-old die for throwing a flower. On Earth, people gathered in the streets, not to protest, not to shout. They stood in silence, millions of them, holding candles in the dark. They stood in Tokyo and New York, in Mumbai and Cairo, in small towns and great cities. They stood and said nothing because there were no words for what they felt. Admiral Chen Weilin received the news in her office on Luna Station. Lily had been her grandniece. She had held the child as a baby, had watched her take her first steps. Now she stared at the photo on her screen and her face showed nothing at all. Her aide stood by the door waiting. "Admiral, your orders." Weilin was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was steady as stone. "Connect me to all human military commands. Every ship, every station, every base. Admiral, the Dominion monitors our communications. If they hear, let them hear." The connection opened. Weilin looked into the camera, and every human officer in the galaxy looked back. "This is Admiral Chen Weilin," she said. "You have seen what they did. You know what it means. I am activating Protocol Prometheus, effective immediately. You know what to do. Move quietly, wait for my signal, and remember her name." Across the stars, human officers began to act. On Varith ships, human technicians quietly locked engineering sections and began writing code. On occupied worlds, human workers hid supplies and mapped escape routes. In homes and barracks and secret meeting places, humans who had never thought of themselves as soldiers started to prepare. The Varith noticed nothing unusual. The humans still bowed when soldiers passed. They still met their quotas. They still seemed afraid. But fear can wear many faces, and sometimes the quietest rooms hold the loudest storms. Enforcer Keth Morin received a promotion for maintaining order in a hostile environment. He celebrated with his fellow soldiers, drinking and laughing about the pathetic humans who could not even protect their children. He did not know that his name had been added to a list. He did not know that his face had been memorized by 10 million humans across the galaxy. He did not know that he had just lit a match in a room filled with fuel. He would learn. They would all learn. The Varith had never studied human history. They saw no reason to learn about the past of a primitive species they had already conquered. This was their first mistake. If they had looked, they would have found something terrifying hiding in the records. Humans did not forget. Humans did not forgive. When pushed to the breaking point, humans did not surrender or scatter like other species. They transformed. 6 weeks after Lily Chen's death, the first incident occurred on Proxima 7, a mining colony deep in Varith space. 3,000 human workers extracted rare minerals from underground tunnels. They had always met their quotas. They had always obeyed. On a Tuesday morning, they stopped. Every human worker in every tunnel sat down on the ground and refused to move. They did not shout or make demands. They simply sat there, silent and still, looking straight ahead with empty eyes. The Varith supervisors were confused. They ordered the humans to return to work. The humans did not move. They threatened punishment. The humans did not move. They brought in soldiers with shock staves. The first soldier to enter the main tunnel triggered a pressure sensor hidden beneath the floor. The explosion killed him instantly. The fire spread to the fuel storage tanks that the humans had quietly repositioned over the past month. 43 Varith soldiers died in the first hour. The entire northern tunnel network collapsed, burying millions of tons of ore that would take years to recover. When rescue teams finally reached the human workers, they found them still sitting in their circles, still silent. Many had died in the explosions. The survivors did not seem to care. They looked at the Varith with eyes that held no fear anymore. Only hate. Commander Thexus received the report on his ship above New Providence. He read it 3 times, certain there must be an error. Humans did not fight back. Humans did not sacrifice themselves. Humans begged and wept and surrendered. Then the second report came in. On the agricultural world of Harvest Prime, human farmers had contaminated the grain reserves with a slow-acting poison. Not deadly, but strong enough to sicken anyone who ate it. The entire Varith garrison spent 2 weeks unable to leave their beds. Then the third report. On a Varith battleship called the Imperius, human technicians had introduced errors into the navigation computer. The ship had jumped to the wrong coordinates and emerged inside an asteroid field. It took 6 months to repair the damage. Then the 4th and the 5th and the 20th. Across the Dominion, humans who had seemed broken and obedient were revealing a different face. They sabotaged equipment that took decades to build. They spread information that the Varith wanted buried. They killed, quietly and precisely, targeting officers who had committed the worst crimes against human civilians. Enforcer Keth Morin died in his sleep 2 months after killing Lily Chen. The doctors found nothing wrong with him. His heart had simply stopped beating. Only later did they discover that his food had been poisoned with an undetectable compound, something a human chemist had developed in a hidden laboratory, specifically for him. Thexus ordered a crackdown. He sent his soldiers into human districts to arrest the troublemakers, to make examples, to restore fear. But when the soldiers arrived, the districts were empty. Millions of humans had vanished overnight. They had retreated into the infrastructure of the worlds they had helped build, into maintenance tunnels and ventilation shafts, into abandoned sections and forgotten storage rooms. They knew every hidden path, every secret door, every weakness in the structures the Varith had never bothered to learn. The soldiers searched for weeks and found nothing but shadows. Meanwhile, the attacks continued. A Varith governor was assassinated in his office. A communications hub exploded, cutting off an entire sector. A prison holding human political prisoners experienced a power failure that opened all the cells and disabled all the guards. Thexus gathered his officers and demanded answers. How is this possible? They have no army, no weapons, no ships. They are farmers and miners and servants. How are they doing this? His intelligence officer brought up a display showing a web of connections spreading across the galaxy. They are not fighting as an army, Commander. They are fighting as individuals. Millions of individuals, each acting alone, each choosing their own targets. We cannot find their leaders because they have no leaders. We cannot break their organization because they have no organization. They are everywhere. Then we will kill them everywhere, Thexus snarled. Every human on every world. We will burn their colonies and poison their planets. We will erase them from existence. Commander, that would require resources we do not have. The other subject species are watching. Some have already begun to show signs of unrest. The Cathari are refusing work orders. The Morvith have stopped communicating with our administrators. If we commit to a genocide against the humans, we may trigger rebellions across the entire Dominion. Thexus slammed his fist against the table, cracking the metal surface. The humans are teaching them to resist. This is what they want, to spread their poison throughout our empire. Yes, Commander, that appears to be exactly what they want. On the mesh, humans shared everything they learned. How to disable Varith equipment. How to move through occupied territories without being seen. How to make weapons from everyday materials. How to die with purpose. And they shared something else too. A simple image that appeared on walls and screens across the galaxy. A little girl holding a flower. Underneath were 3 words in every language known to the Varith subjects. Remember her name. The Cathari painted it on their factory walls. The Morvith carved it into the hulls of their ships. Species who had been slaves for centuries looked at that image and saw something new. If the humans could fight, perhaps they could too. The fire was spreading, and the Varith did not know how to put it out. High Archon Vexus, supreme ruler of the Dominion, called a council of war. The greatest military minds of the Empire gathered to discuss a single question: how to destroy humanity before humanity destroyed them. The answer they chose would determine the fate of the galaxy. The War Council met in the Great Hall of the Dominion, a chamber carved from a single block of black stone on the Varith homeworld. For 3,000 years, the rulers of the Empire had gathered here to plan their conquests. The walls were covered with the flags of defeated species, trophies from 100 wars. High Archon Vexus sat on a throne made from the bones of his enemies. He was old even for a Varith, his gray skin cracked and faded like ancient rock. But his eyes were still sharp, and his mind still cruel. "Reports," he commanded. Admiral Korath stepped forward. He was the greatest military commander in the Dominion, a veteran of 40 campaigns across a dozen star systems. His record was perfect. He had never lost a battle. "The situation is worse than we expected, High Archon. Human resistance has spread to every occupied world. Our supply lines are compromised. Our communication networks are unreliable. We have lost control of several minor systems, and the infection is spreading to other species." "Other species?" Vexus leaned forward. "Explain." "The Cathari have begun organizing strikes on their factory worlds. The Morvith have withdrawn their worldships to unknown coordinates and refuse to respond to our orders. The Threll have attacked 3 of our outposts along their border." Korath paused. "They are all using tactics they learned from the humans. They are coordinating through networks we cannot track. They are sharing resources we cannot trace." Vexus was silent for a long moment. The other members of the council shifted nervously. When the High Archon was quiet, people died. "How many humans exist in the galaxy?" Vexus finally asked. "Approximately 18 billion, High Archon, scattered across their 12 colonies and homeworld." "And how many Varith soldiers do we have?" 900 million in active service, another 2 billion in reserve." "Then the math is simple. We have more than enough force to exterminate them." A younger officer spoke up from the back of the room. "High Archon, with respect, the math is not simple. A full genocide campaign would require the commitment of most of our military forces for decades. During that time, our other holdings would be vulnerable if the rebellion spreads. It will not spread if we demonstrate what happens to those who resist. Vexus stood, his ancient joints cracking. The humans have given the galaxy a symbol, a dead child. We will give them a better one, a dead species. When the other races see what we do to Earth, they will understand that rebellion means extinction. They will return to their proper place. And if they do not? Vexus smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. Then we will have many more flags for our walls. The council voted. The decision was unanimous. The largest fleet in Dominion history would be assembled. 3,000 warships, crewed by 10 million soldiers, armed with weapons that could crack planets. They would travel to Earth, destroy the human homeworld, and hunt down every colony until not a single human remained alive. The order went out that night. Across the Empire, ships began to gather. The greatest military operation in galactic history was underway. On Luna Station, Admiral Chen Weilin received intelligence reports from a network of spies that had taken years to build. She knew the fleet was coming. She knew how many ships, how many soldiers, how many weapons. She knew that in a direct battle humanity would lose. Her own fleet consisted of 600 vessels. They were fast, modern, and crewed by people willing to die. But against 3,000 Varith warships, they would last perhaps an hour. She gathered her senior officers in a conference room overlooking Earth. The blue planet hung in the window, beautiful and fragile, covered with clouds and oceans, and the lights of cities where billions of people slept, unaware of what was coming. "They will be here in 3 weeks," Weilin said. "Our job is not to defeat them. Our job is to make them pay such a price that they never come back." Captain Torres, commander of the carrier Defiance, studied the tactical displays. "We cannot match them in firepower. We cannot match them in numbers. What can we match them in?" "Knowledge," Weilin pointed to a map of the solar system. "This is our home. We know every asteroid, every moon, every orbital path. We have been preparing for this moment for 50 years, since we first learned the Varith existed. The system is full of surprises." She outlined the plan. It would require perfect timing, complete coordination, and a willingness to sacrifice everything. The officers listened in silence. When she finished, no one spoke for a long moment. Finally, Captain Torres stood. "Admiral, I have served under 3 commanders. None of them prepared for something like this. May I ask how long you have been planning?" Weilin looked out at Earth. "My grandmother was a historian. She used to tell me stories about the wars humans fought against each other. Terrible wars, cruel wars. But she said something that stayed with me. She said that humans are never more dangerous than when they are defending their homes. She said that something happens to us when our children are threatened. We become something else." "What do we become?" "Something that does not stop, something that does not surrender, something that would rather die standing than live kneeling." She turned back to her officers. "The Varith think they know what they are facing. They think we are soft and weak and divided. They are about to learn how wrong they are." The officers returned to their ships to prepare. In the 3 weeks that followed, humans across the solar system worked without rest. Miners positioned asteroids along calculated trajectories. Engineers built mass drivers in hidden locations. Technicians programmed drones to act independently when communications failed. And ordinary civilians made their own preparations. Families recorded messages for each other, just in case. Parents held their children a little tighter at night. Old men and women who remembered Earth's last great wars taught young people how to survive, how to hide, how to resist. The Varith fleet entered the outer solar system on a bright Tuesday morning. 3,000 ships arranged in perfect formation, blocking out the stars. They expected a quick victory. They had no idea what was waiting for them. Admiral Chen Weilin watched them approach on her tactical display. She thought of Lily Chen, her grandniece who would never grow up. She thought of all the children on Earth, sleeping peacefully, trusting the adults to protect them. She opened a channel to her fleet. All commands, this is Admiral Chen. Execute Protocol Prometheus. May God have mercy on us all. The battle for Earth had begun. The Vareth fleet emerged from hyperspace beyond the orbit of Neptune, their sensors sweeping the darkness for signs of human resistance. Admiral Korath stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching the tactical display with satisfaction. "Where is the human fleet?" he asked. "Unknown, Admiral. We detect no enemy vessels in range." Korath frowned. He had expected the humans to make a stand at the outer planets, to buy time for evacuations, to do something. This emptiness felt wrong. "Proceed toward Earth, maximum speed. Launch fighter screens to scout ahead." The armada began to move, 3,000 warships gliding through the void like a school of metal sharks. The fighter squadrons spread out in front, scanning for threats. The first mines detonated 6 hours later. They were not ordinary explosives. Human engineers had spent decades perfecting them. Each mine contained thousands of metal fragments, accelerated to impossible speeds by magnetic fields. At such velocities, a piece of metal the size of a grain of sand could punch through armor like paper. 14 screening vessels vanished in the first wave. The fragments tore through their hulls, killing everyone aboard in seconds. The explosions created clouds of debris that spread outward, forcing the following ships to change course. Korath ordered his fleet to scatter, to spread out and avoid the kill zones. This was standard doctrine. It would protect his ships. It also broke his formation exactly as Admiral Chen had planned. The human fleet appeared from the shadow of Jupiter's moons, where they had been waiting with engines cold and systems silent. 600 ships against 3,000. Impossible odds. But the humans did not attack the warships. They dove straight for the supply vessels at the center of the Vareth formation, the fuel tankers, the ammunition carriers, the repair ships that any long-range fleet needed to survive. The Vareth capital ships turned to engage, but they were too slow. Human vessels were smaller, faster, designed for exactly this kind of strike. They raced through the formation, launching missiles at anything that could not shoot back. 43 supply ships exploded before Korath managed to reorganize his fleet into a defensive posture. The human vessels retreated before he could destroy them, vanishing back into the darkness. "Damage report," Korath demanded. "We have lost 30% of our fuel reserves and 40% of our ammunition stores, Admiral. At current consumption, we can sustain combat operations for approximately 6 days. 6 days. The humans had cut his operational window from months to less than a week with a single strike. "Continue toward Earth. We will destroy them before our supplies run out." The fleet pushed forward, slower now, more cautious. The asteroid belt lay ahead, a ring of rocks orbiting the sun between the outer and inner planets. Normal fleets avoided it, taking longer routes around the debris field. Korath did not have time for longer routes. The first asteroid struck his fleet 12 hours later, then another, then 100 more. Humans had been mining the belt for generations. They knew every rock, every orbit, every path through the chaos. And they had spent the last 3 weeks attaching engines to the largest asteroids, nudging them onto collision courses with mathematical precision. Rocks the size of buildings fell on the Vareth fleet like rain. Point defense systems fired until they overheated. Ships maneuvered desperately to avoid impacts. Some succeeded. Many did not. By the time the fleet emerged from the belt, Korath had lost 400 vessels. 1,000 more were damaged. His ammunition was nearly gone. His crews were exhausted. And Earth still hung before him, blue and white and beautiful, surrounded by the last remnants of the human fleet. Admiral Chen Weilin broadcast on an open channel, her voice calm and clear. "To the Vareth Armada, You came to destroy us. You came to burn our world and murder our children. I want you to understand something before the end. This is not a battle. This is not a war. This is a consequence. You killed a little girl for throwing a flower. Now you will learn what that costs." Korath laughed. "You have 600 ships against 2,000. You have no ammunition left. Your tricks have delayed us, nothing more. Earth will burn within the hour." "I know," Chen replied. "That is why we are not trying to stop you." The human fleet began to move. Not away from the Vareth formation, but toward it. Not in attack runs, but in straight lines, accelerating faster than any ship should accelerate toward an enemy. Korath understood too late. 53 human vessels struck Vareth warships at near light speed. Their reactors overloaded on impact, creating explosions that rivaled small stars. The chain reaction spread through the tightly packed formation, ships destroying ships in an expanding wave of fire. In the chaos, human boarding parties launched from the remaining vessels. Not to capture, to destroy. Marines in lightweight armor fought through corridors designed for beings twice their size, dying by the hundreds, pushing forward with a fury that the Vareth had never seen. They were heading for the reactor cores. Korath watched his fleet die around him. The eternal dominion shook as human marines breached the outer hull. He could hear the fighting in the corridors, getting closer with every minute. "Retreat," he ordered. "All ships retreat to hyperspace." But his navigation systems were failing. Human technicians who had served aboard Vareth ships for years had left behind hidden programs, code that activated at the worst possible moment. Jump coordinates scrambled, engines misfired, ships trying to flee crashed into each other. Of the 3,000 vessels that had entered the solar system, fewer than 200 escaped. Admiral Chen Weilin watched them go. Her own fleet had been reduced to 80 ships. 40 million humans had died in the battle, including most of the crews who had rammed the Vareth formation. They had known they would not survive. They had volunteered anyway. She opened a channel to the survivors. "All commands Phase 2, take the war to them." Across the galaxy, human cells that had spent months preparing emerged from hiding. On every Vareth world, every occupied colony, every station and outpost, humans who had been waiting for this signal began to act. They were joined by others. Cathari rebels who had been inspired by human resistance. Morveth warships that appeared from hidden coordinates to blockade Vareth supply routes. Threll soldiers who turned their weapons on Vareth commanders. The Dominion, which had ruled through fear for 3,000 years, discovered that fear could turn against its masters. High Archon Vexus died 18 months later, executed by his own guards during a palace coup. The Dominion splintered into a dozen smaller states, each one too weak to threaten the newly formed human coalition. The war had cost humanity dearly, 40 million dead, 3 colonies destroyed, scars that would take generations to heal. But something had been born in the fire, a recognition among the galaxy's species that tyranny was not permanent, that the powerful could fall, that a child's life had value beyond measure. On the rebuilt colony of New Providence, they erected a statue in the central square. A little girl, forever 7 years old, holding a flower in her outstretched hand. People came from across the galaxy to see it, humans, Cathari, Morveth, and others. They stood before it and remembered what had been sacrificed. The inscription at the base was simple. "For Lily, for all the children, we remember, we resist, we endure." Admiral Chen Weilin visited the statue once, on the first anniversary of the battle. She stood alone in the early morning light, looking at the bronze face of her grandniece. "We won," she said quietly, "but I wish you were here to see it." The wind blew across the square, carrying the scent of flowers from the fields beyond the colony. Somewhere in the distance, children were laughing. Chen wiped her eyes and walked away. The galaxy had changed forever, and it had started with a little girl who threw a flower at a monster. Some fires once lit can never be put out,